Welcome to Satsang.
Could you please talk about diet and lifestyle for higher consciousness?
Lifestyle. I recall Ramana Maharshi talking about diet being a very important part of higher consciousness. And of course, Ramana being basically a Hindu, they have the three gunas, or the three types of energy that they say are in all things: sattvic, rajasic and tamasic, ranging from lower consciousness to higher consciousness. And there's definitely something in it, in that the food we eat can actually put us to sleep or take us into a lower consciousness, or it can actually irritate us and make us anxious or running faster. Example of that would be coffee, maybe sugar. Rajasic, anything rajasic causes a certain anxiety or tension or fastness in us. Anything that's tamasic kind of slows us down and puts us to sleep, takes us into unconsciousness, laziness, all that sort of thing. And then there's the sattvic foods, which actually allow us to be clear and awake, alert and fresh. And I think there is something in that. I really do. I noticed that over the years, the diet that I started to choose was quite sattvic, basically because I like clarity. It wasn't because of ideology. It was because I could feel what the food was doing inside me and how it was affecting my mind. I could feel whether it was putting me to sleep or whether it was making me more racy. And I tended to head towards more foods that allowed me to be crisp, clear, and have clarity. And so I think diet is important. If you go online, you can find out all about the three gunas and the different types of food that affect you in different ways. It is a Hindu understanding, Ayurvedic, but I believe it's true. And it does give a percentage to you. If you're sitting in meditation and you're irritated by the food you're eating, or you're being put to sleep by the food you're eating, well, that's not a good idea. Lifestyle's a whole nother thing. Lifestyle can support higher consciousness, or it can support lower consciousness. And when we start looking at lifestyle, it's the things that we get into that either lift our consciousness levels or close them down. And we look at things like computer games or a lot of television, and we've got to say, well, that's not going to lift our consciousness levels a great deal. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to keep us in lower consciousness because it's all dream-based. Then we look at sports, on the other hand, particularly fast-moving sports, push bike riding, squash, football. These sports keep you very alert and very aware, and as a result, can assist in raising consciousness levels. Then there are other lifestyles that aren't so good. Going out to hotels and getting drunk, doing drugs. These lifestyles tend to take you down into lower consciousness. Most drugs take you into dream. They don't actually raise your consciousness levels. Alcohol kind of doesn't make you any more intelligent, and they call marijuana dope for a reason. So it's up to you. It's like, what are you into? It's just Australians and, well, generally the rest of the world are into escapism. And so they use these kind of things to take them away, change their consciousness levels from the consequences of the moment, but effectively usually take people into lower consciousness. And so these are different things that affect our consciousness levels, and that's our lifestyle. What are we actually into? How do we meet the world? Do we meet it with an alertness? Do we meet it with a freshness? Do we meet it with present moment awareness? Or are we meeting it with dream and haze and unconsciousness? And that's very much going to be up to you, because you create your lifestyle. Nobody does it for you. Nobody does it to you. You are responsible for how you think and what you do. And if you're into higher consciousness, choosing a lifestyle or choosing a way of living in the world that keeps you fresh and vital and in the moment and relaxed is quite important. Anything that constantly stresses you out is probably not good for higher consciousness, because that will keep you into the Rajasic style of life, which is unconscious to a large degree. Being relaxed and being present helps raise consciousness levels. So anything that keeps you relaxed and keeps you present in your lifestyle is probably good. If you can be relaxed and race cars or race motorbikes or do martial arts or do football or do any of these activities that are dangerous, that's probably really good. But the key is to be able to do it and be relaxed. Because if you can do those sports and be relaxed, it means that you've actually surrendered your mind to some degree. You've accepted consequences. You're not getting uptight. You're staying cool while under fire. And so certain lifestyles keep people very present. If you ever shake hands with someone who lays bricks for a living, you'll find that that person is a very present person. And the reason they're very present is because they have to be present a lot of the time during the day, otherwise they muck up what they're doing. They have to be present to the physicality of their hands and what they're doing. And so they tend to be very present. You find a bricklayer who's not very present, and they're probably not a bricklayer. Because they use their hands. On the other hand, you meet people who are involved with computers, and they can be very, very not present because they're in their heads. They're locked in their minds. And so playing with computers all day long doesn't facilitate a lifestyle that is good for higher consciousness. Not really, because it's too heady. It's too dreamy. And the whole thing about higher consciousness is getting out of the head, not further into it. And so lifestyle's important, and it's up to you. If you really want a lifestyle that will support higher consciousness, do something that involves you being physical in the world, in the garden. Anything that involves you being physical, because when our awareness is in our bodies instead of our heads, we have present moment awareness to what is real rather than what is not real. And that helps raise consciousness levels as well. And so, are there any questions, any statements, any challenges to this teaching here today?
You've spoken about drugs being used against higher consciousness. Is it true that drugs can give us insight into true nature?
They can. Drugs have been used for thousands of years by sadhus and gurus and shaman to actually get insight. And there is nothing wrong with getting insight. You can get insight from having a conversation with someone, or being involved in some form of encounter group, or being a meditator and just watching your mind. You can also get it from drugs. But insight, and this is where the big mistake comes, insight is not the answer. Insight doesn't raise your consciousness levels. What raises your consciousness levels is having the insight and then doing the work. The insight is an invitation to do the work, to change something. Most people think the insight is the answer. It's not the answer. The answer is doing the work. In other words, practicing something different to what you've been doing before. And that is up to you. It's a huge mistake to think that insight is going to raise your consciousness levels. That's like collecting knowledge and thinking somehow that's going to raise your consciousness levels. It doesn't. The only thing that raises your consciousness levels is watching the mind, and when you see the obstacles, removing them, doing something different to what you've done before. This raises consciousness levels. And so, yes, certain drugs can give you insight. But generally what happens to people is they become insight junkies. And so they just keep taking the drug because it alters their consciousness and gives them insight, somehow thinking that that's going to change their life. And it is not going to change their life. Only the practice of something different to what you've been doing before will change your life. Quite often people who get into using drugs for insights become addicted to the change of consciousness. And so they get hooked on drugs.
Frank has asked, are feelings real?
On one level, everything that appears is real because it's all vibrational. On another level, what does it all appear in? Scientists have discovered that the center of the electron is empty. The center of the atom is empty through the electron microscope. And so what is actually real is an interesting question. Sages have been saying that everything is empty for thousands and thousands of years, for 10,000 years. Scientists discovered in the last 60 years that at the center of everything there is nothing. Now, if we have a look at the things around us that we think are real, they're all in vibration. They're all vibrating. And some of them are vibrating so slow they appear solid. Thoughts are also vibrating. Feelings are also vibrating. But unlike thoughts, feelings are not imagined. They're real. All thoughts are imagined. Without imagination, there are no thoughts, yet there can be feelings. Have a look for yourself. Examine your own mind and have a look. What actually happens? The feelings are there. You can feel them. Thoughts come and go, but they're imagined. Thoughts are all imagined. Sit in no mind for a while and watch. You can have feelings without thoughts. Feelings tend to be more real than thoughts. But thoughts, in my perception, are not real. They're just imagined. What is real is beingness, our true nature. Everything appears in it, stays a while, and disappears in it, but it remains, always here. Have a look. These are good things for seekers to have a look at. What is real and what is not real? Work out to discern the difference between what is real and what is not real. Nothing you think is real.
The next question is, I work in a job that involves a lot of calculations and being on a computer in an office. Is there any way I can maintain higher consciousness while doing that?
It's going to be difficult because you're actually working with your mind, and the mind is basically a dream machine. And your awareness is in the dream machine, in the matrix. And the whole idea of higher consciousness and enlightenment is to escape that matrix, get out of that matrix. And so it's difficult to stay free if you're going to play constantly in the world of computers, which is the world of thoughts. Have a look for yourself and see.
I find I am a naturally nervous person. How can I live my life in a calmer state?
Okay. See, what I did in my life is I became a meditator, which meant I used to sit and watch my breath for an hour to 2 hours a day. And that allowed my mind to calm down. It allowed me to see through my mind. It allowed me to rest because I could see what was agitating me, what was getting me going. And for a lot of years, if I found myself in an anxious state, I would allow myself to breathe out fully. And on the outward breath, I would let go of everything. And when we let go of everything, our mind can then relax again. And so I used the outward breath for a lot of years, just as a way to let go and come back to a resting state. If you don't do anything about your mind, it will stay the same. But if you become a meditator and you use the breath to practice relaxing, dying on the outward breath, you'll find it'll change you after a while, but that's going to be up to you. How badly do you want it? What you put into it is what you're going to get out of it.
A viewer has asked, is there such a thing as high vibrational foods?
I'm sorry, I missed the last word that you said.
Is there such a thing as high vibrational food?
Yes, everything is vibrational. So yes, we have different vibrations in food, and we have different vibrations in fresh food to cooked food. I would say that a fresh orange is probably of a greater, higher vibration than a piece of steak. But you're going to have to look and see for yourself. In a lot of ways, high consciousness is about frequency. That's true. But the best way we can raise the frequency of our body and of our mind is by being present to reality instead of dreaming. The way we lower our vibration is by our angsting, by our dreaming, by our getting angry, by our clouding our mind with procrastination. You want to raise your vibration, get out of your head and get into reality.
From your experience before awakening, is it possible to be sattvic all the time as an ego?
Yes, it is. When I turned, before I turned 20, I realized that clarity was an extremely important quality in anybody who wanted to be in the world of business, to be an entrepreneur. And that without clarity, it was a waste of time. And I was fortunate enough to be involved with a group of men and women who were into a higher consciousness and were into business, and they were into clarity. And so I got into clarity when I was quite young. I got into recognizing clearly the patterns inside my mind that took me to lower consciousness and the patterns in my mind that supported higher consciousness. Things like worry take you to lower consciousness. Anger locks you in lower consciousness. Any victim-orientated thinking takes you into lower consciousness. And so two of the things that I stopped very early in the piece, was when I was 19, was I stopped worry. I just would not entertain it. If it arose, it was denied. It was actually stopped. And that went on for a couple of years before worry stopped coming. And with victim-orientated thinking, that's where we get to blame other people, or we blame situations, or we blame ourselves for something. I stopped that too, because I could not see the point in being that messy inside myself. If we go into blame, we've got a dream happening that somebody or something or we have done something to us. We've been damaged somehow, or hurt somehow, or let down somehow. And it's just a dream. It takes us into lower consciousness, and it does not create a sattvic mind. And so I got into clarity when I was quite young, because I enjoyed winning, basically. You see, if you have clarity, you can see what's coming. You can see what's going. You can see the big picture of life. You're not caught in some little picture inside your mind. Clarity, or a sattvic mind, is brilliant in the material world, but it's also brilliant in the world of higher consciousness. If you want higher consciousness, you need to really find a way to head towards a sattvic mind, a mind that is clear, a mind that is concise, that is fresh. But that's up to you. No one's going to make you. If you have a mind that is constantly victim orientated, well, you're going to stay in lower consciousness, because that's just what happens. If you have a mind that is constantly worrying and you're not doing anything about stopping it, well, you're going to stay lost in lower consciousness. That's just how it is. No one makes the rules. They just are the way they are. If you want to have a sattvic mind, basically get out of your head. Get into reality. Up to you. What do you want? And what are you willing to pay for it?
Kalimba would like to ask a question.
Hey, Kalimba. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad at all, mate. On the subject of diet and stuff like that, it just reminded me of a little story, and which explains why, if kids are told the truth about how meat and stuff like that is prepared, they'd be more likely to be vegetarian. Because when I came over from from Nimbin to Nanup in the mid-80s, the family I lived with on the community, we were all vegetarian. I was doing most of the cooking. And then the kids came home from school one day and said, "Oh, Mum, Dad, can we have some chicken during the week?" And we said, "Oh, hang on, we're vegetarians." They said, "Oh, we tried some at school and it was really nice." So that evening we had an adult get together and we sort of talked about it. And we said, well, if we say no, they're going to do it at school and whatever. So how do we work this? So I looked on the community thing, and there was a place in Busselton that sold organic chicken. I thought, all right, well, we'll give it a go. Came over, and when I got the chickens, the lady said, "Have you got a couple of boxes?" I said, "Boxes? I can just carry them." He said, No, they're alive. And I went, hang on. So I got the chickens, took them home, put them in an old chicken coop in Nanup. The kids came back from school and said, "Are we going to have chicken at the weekend? Are we going?" I said, "Yeah, but we're going to need your help." They said, "Sure, anything." So I took them out to the backyard and I said, "Oh, see those 2 chickens there? Oh, wow." I said, "That's called lunch and that's called dinner. Now, what you're going to have to do at the weekend is you're going to have to catch one for me, cut its head off, pull it." Oh, we never got asked about eating meat again.
Good one, Kalimba. Yeah, my kids wanted to eat. I was a vegetarian. I'm now a vegan, but my kids wanted to eat meat, so I let them, because that was their choice, and my choice was my choice. I used to be a hunter, and I've killed a lot of animals in hunting. At some point, I recognized that I had too much blood on my hands, and so I became a vegetarian. It was a conscientious decision. That was back in 1982 or something like that, I think. And but my kids, we had chickens in the backyard as well. But they didn't mind. They didn't mind that they had to be killed for them to have chicken. So it depends on the kids, I guess, Kalimba, as to how much consciousness at that particular time they have. Now, I will point out that all my children eventually became vegetarians, but of their own decision.
Yep.
And one of them, two of them now are vegans, but that's of their own volition. That was not something that was forced upon them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if they know the whole procedure and what happens, and particularly these days with the horrible ways animals are treated and crushed into things and taken to slaughterhouses and killed so inhumanely, I think if a lot of people were aware of that, a lot of people would decide to become vegetarian.
I think that's probably true. I went and had a look at an abattoir one day, and that really was quite horrifying to see how the animals were so frightened before they die and how they'd squeal and carry on. But most people don't see that. They just see the freshly packed meat at a butcher shop or in Coles or somewhere like that, and that's okay. I don't blame people for the way they are. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's not blame. It's just, as I said, my understanding is that people don't realize the process. And the other thing somebody told me was, in the way they're slaughtered these days, with all, as you said, the fear that comes in and the squeaking and squawking, that puts a lot of fear adrenaline into the meat itself, which then we absorb later.
Well, that's true too, but I've heard it said that makes it tenderer.
Oh, well. Thanks, Vishrant.
It's so funny as a vegan talking about meat, because I love animals. I just love them to bits, and I can't be involved in harming them. But I also give people the right to do what they want to do at their consciousness level too.
Yeah, that totally resonates.
Nice talking to you, Kalimba. It always is.
Thank you, Vishrant.
Satcha would like to ask a question.
Hello, Satcha.
Hello, Vishrant. Vishrant, my question is, vegetable also is like a being and very sensitive. So, in a way, it is also like when we kill animals, or like is the other side we kill. A plant also. So, can you just describe on that, please?
You want to know the difference between killing a plant and killing an animal? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, please.
Well, I don't think the plant is conscious enough to know that it's being murdered.
Okay.
Animals know, like animals fight for their life. They don't just surrender. They don't just stand still and allow you to kill them. They actually fight to the very bitter end for their life because they don't want to die. I have never seen a plant do that. Not that I'm saying we're not killing plants. Of course we're killing them if we're going to eat them. But I don't think there's the same consciousness level in them that suffers like an animal does when it's going to be killed and when it's being killed.
Okay, so if it is plant, it is all depends on the level of consciousness, and it will affect on our karma also.
Well, plants don't tend to have very high consciousness levels, or at least we haven't been able to measure them yet. I mean, I can feel trees and I can feel plants, but their consciousness levels don't seem that alert or that awake or that aware as that of any animal I've ever met. Animals, no matter what they are, or even if they're insects, will fight to the end to survive because their most valuable possession is their life. The same as our most valuable possession in a lot of ways is our life.
Okay. And Vishrant, when we eat animals, in a way we are building our bad karma or something like that?
Look, I don't think we can be involved in hurting any being without attracting negative karma.
Okay.
I mean, well, you look at it this way. If someone tried to kill your family and they succeeded, do you think they would have good karma for doing so?
No, not at all.
I don't think so either. When it comes down to karma, I think there is a consequence for everything we do, everything for everyone. There is a consequence. And this is why in Buddhism, we talk about loving kindness. It's why we talk about a way of life or a lifestyle that is taken care of rather than taking. Because in a lot of ways, that creates a beautiful life, but it also creates good karma.
Okay, Vishrant. Thank you, Vishrant.
Thank you.
A question from a viewer is, isn't it the bad karma of animals to be eaten by humans? If this is so, why should we stop eating meat?
I love this argument. This is a real good one. It's their fault, right? It's their fault we murder them. Why don't we put that into context and say that the animals are humans? Is it their bad karma that we murder them? And are we going to murder them because it's their bad karma? Take it away from us and animals and put it into human context, because animals are beings as well, the same as humans. They're just less intelligent, that's all. How would it be for us to go out and kill some people because it's their bad karma to be killed?
The next question from a viewer is, I have heard a guru say, when one rises above the three gunas that originate in the body, one is freed from birth, old age, disease, and death, and attains enlightenment. How can a person raise above being sattvic?
I have no idea. Sattvic is absolute clarity and purity. Someone who's awake actually lives that way. Their mind is pristine and clear. So I don't know. I don't know who the guru is who stated that. It doesn't make sense to me.
The next question is, can you tell if someone has higher consciousness by the way they live their life?
No. You can only tell if someone has higher consciousness by their vibration, really. People can pretend to be in higher consciousness. They can pretend all sorts of things, because humans are great fakes. We are amazing at pretending to be holy, at pretending to be further ahead, at pretending to be all sorts of things. The only way that you can tell if a person's consciousness levels are high or not is by the vibration they're putting out. Someone who's awake has a Buddha field, and that can be perceived. If there is no Buddha field, they are not awake. No matter how elegant or how holy they seem.
The follow-up to that question is, are there any common traits of a person who is in higher consciousness?
Probably are. Let me ponder that for a tick. When I ponder things, it means my mind goes totally empty. People in higher consciousness. Well, one thing is they won't get angry. Are we talking higher consciousness or super consciousness? Higher consciousness happens within the mind. Super consciousness is when awareness is aware of itself, when enlightenment occurs. And so what are we talking about here? Higher consciousness or enlightenment, I wonder? Because there's definitely traits with people who are awake. In higher consciousness, not too sure.
What are the traits of people that are awake?
Well, first of all, they have a Buddha field that can be perceived. That Buddha field will actually slow your mind down and eventually stop it if you're close enough and you just hang around long enough. It expands your mind because your mind is a contraction, and the energy field around someone who's awake is expanding. And so the contraction of the mind starts to expand, and you find yourself with expanded mind or no mind. So that's one trait. Another trait for someone who's awake is they won't be suffering fear because they've already died. The survival mechanism has already surrendered unconditionally. They won't be suffering anger because they don't get caught in dream. They're free. If someone's still suffering anger or still getting caught in fear, they're not awake. There's something that hasn't surrendered yet.
A viewer has asked, I have changed my lifestyle by no longer drinking alcohol, eating meat, and dedicating my spare time to seeking truth. I sometimes question why I keep doing this, as it can feel like I am missing out on what I used to consider fun. Is this questioning a normal part of the spiritual journey?
Spiritual journey, you're a seeker and you can't help it. And this is an interesting thing to note. Most people actually aren't seekers. They are quite happy to have the marriage, the 2.5 kids and the station wagon and live happily ever after, which is a dream that doesn't actually happen. But that's what most people go for. A seeker is a seeking wisdom and truth. They are a little different and they're quite rare, in fact. So the seeker wants to find something different, the meaning of life, the purpose of life. Who am I? And this quite often goes against society's understandings and beliefs. It quite often goes against their religious beliefs. The seeker is the seeker. The seeker wants to lift the rocks and see what's under them. And so from the perspective of being someone who tries to help seekers, I have an interest in seekers. I have an interest in those who are interested in truth. I have an interest in those who are willing to do something about it. But they're actually rare. They're not as common as you think. You think of all the people you know outside your own spiritual group, how many of them are into seeking? Then you think of your family, how many of them are seekers? How many of your old friends are seekers? Really, really seekers? Not that many.
Frank has asked the following question. So then if you are awake, do you follow the guidance on pleasant feelings?
Heck no. If that was the case, Frank, I wouldn't be holding satsang. I'd be sitting in my room blissed out to the max every day, like some gurus are. No, to actually be in the company of humans is actually a painful experience because I have absolutely no defenses whatsoever against any energy that wants to come in. But my teacher, Osho Rajneesh, or my spiritual master, said if you find the light, you share it. You don't hide it away. You don't sit in your room and bliss out. You take it out into the marketplace and you help others find the light. And so as far as following pleasant feelings, I do not think so. The preference for pleasant feelings over discomfort died 21 years ago. You see, when awakening occurs, it has occurred because you have surrendered everything, including the preferences for pleasant feelings over uncomfortable feelings. It is an unconditional surrender.
A viewer has asked, I find sitting in nature alone gives me clarity, but as soon as I am around people and not in nature, my thinking becomes dull and I feel tired. How can I still function with clarity and remain neutral when I'm around a lot of people?
It can be difficult. Depends on whether it's your own mind that's creating the haze or whether it's energy that you're picking up from other people that's creating the haze. But one way or another, the haze is there as a result of being with other people. And it is very difficult. And this is why anybody that's into higher consciousness has to have some way of getting clarity, has to have some way of clearing their energy so they can actually have that clarity. From me, I used to dance a lot. I loved dancing. I used to dance wildly. And then after dancing wildly, I would sit. Or I'd go for a swim in the ocean or a swim in the river, or I'd have a cold shower. Anything that actually gave me back my clarity was valuable. And so I was totally pragmatic. I used to hunt waterfalls. I used to love them. You stand underneath a waterfall, you get very pristine pretty quick. But ultimately, it's the way we think that kills our clarity. If we're negative thinkers, we're not going to have much clarity because negative thinking, including procrastination and worry, cloud us. You want clarity, you have to pay a price for it, particularly if you're in the marketplace. You have to clear. It's up to you.
I have heard that people wake up due to grace and nothing else. Can you please talk about your own experience with grace?
Yep. I've checked out grace for a long time now because I was interested in grace because I heard so many spiritual teachers talking about grace. And then it came to me, when a spiritual teacher uses the word grace, what they're really saying is they don't know what's happening. Because all awakenings are by grace, but ultimately we don't know what's happening, whether it's karmic or whatever. You can prepare the mind for awakening. You can actually develop a mind that is equanimous, a mind that doesn't flinch when attacked. It just stays still. You can surrender unconditionally and still not wake up. And so that's where this idea or this understanding of grace comes in. You find yourself as beingness, bang, and you go, grace. But I have no idea what it means. It could be karmic. I suspect it is, because everything we put into life we get back. I don't understand grace. I can't pretend to understand grace. I can use the word grace and pretend I know, but I don't really know. I think that awakening for all people can be called an accident, those people who do wake up, because there's nothing you can really do to wake up. You can self-inquire, but that doesn't keep you awake. You can remove all the obstacles in the way, develop an equanimous mind, still won't keep you awake. And so this word comes into play, grace. I'd prefer to call it, I don't know.
Traditionally, Buddhist monks renounce the world to pursue enlightenment. What does it take for someone with a family and career to reach enlightenment?
So I don't deal with Buddhist monks, I deal with lay people. I do have Buddhist monks as friends on Facebook, but my words are for the lay people, the people who are in the marketplace, the people who have families, the people who actually have a job and have to earn a living to pay the bills. And it is absolutely 100% possible to wake up in the marketplace if you're willing to practice acceptance, if you're willing to meditate, if you're willing to self-inquire, if you're willing to practice openness. All of these practices will facilitate awakening while in the marketplace. But if you're not willing to do these practices, I would say it's pretty much impossible, because it's too hard in the marketplace. There's too many distractions. There's too many things that pull you into lower consciousness. But as a meditator, you develop present moment awareness, and you develop a witness that sees the mind. So you now have separation from the mind. Now you can see the obstacles that are in the way and you can remove them. If you practice openness, you start finding heart. To practice openness, you also have to remove all the obstacles that are in the way, all the defense systems. And this is something that can be done in the marketplace. I played the game of zero. Zero being a flat line where I was totally resting. Anything above zero was something that was in the way. And so anytime I felt myself above zero, contracted or in resistance to life anyway, in any way, shape or form, I'd have a look at what belief systems came into play to create that contraction. And they were undone. They were removed. And so preparing the mind is really a great undoing. And this can be done in the marketplace if you use the marketplace to teach you unconditional surrender. And this is done through the practice of acceptance of what is. If you're in a relationship with someone, you can practice acceptance with what is, because they're the people who are going to trigger you the most. They're the ones who are going to show you where inside of you haven't shown up yet in surrender and love. And so the marketplace can definitely be used by lay people to wake up, but it has to be used. You can't just read books about higher consciousness or listen to teachers about higher consciousness and think that somehow you're going to wake up. I don't think that's going to happen. You have to do the work to prepare the mind to facilitate enlightenment. And if you want to, you can. It's absolutely possible. But that's going to be up to you, because you're responsible for how you think and you're responsible for what you do in the world.
A viewer has asked, can you find contentment in life while experiencing the other two gunas, tamas and rajas?
Contentment in life. You've got to be kidding. Examine the mind. What causes discontentment? What causes contentment? Discontentment is caused by our constantly wanting things to be different than how they are. That's called desires. Discontentment is caused by us being attached to things and then those things getting threatened and us trying to save them. Discontentment. If you're ego-based, you are going to be discontent, because it is the nature of the mind to be discontent. It's the nature of the mind to constantly desire things to be a little different than how they are. That is resistance to life, and that is suffering. That is not acceptance of life. If you want to be free of that, the only true way to be free of that is to wake up to your true nature. Beingness doesn't suffer, but the I does. Can you be happy or content in the two lower gunas? As long as you're ego-based, no matter where you're at, you're not going to be completely content. How can you be? The ego is not based on contentment. It's based on survival. Constantly desiring things to be changed, different than how they are. terrified that things are going to be taken away. You want to be free, wake up. It's the only way to be free. Have awareness find itself in you, and then the mind will settle down and be quiet and rest in beingness.
A viewer has asked, how would I show up in love for myself?
Okay, so if you're not in acceptance of yourself, it's unlikely you're going to show up in love for yourself. The foundation to higher consciousness is self-acceptance. And in self-acceptance, we can rest to some degree. The mind can rest to some degree because it's not against itself. But the other thing about love is we have to be undefended. We have to be open. And so there's a couple of different variants there that need to be achieved. Openness means we drop our defense systems. Self-acceptance means that we don't hold ourselves in contempt anywhere, but we accept ourselves totally, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And until we do really accept ourselves totally, it is hard to be self-loving. It is hard to be self-nourishing because there's a part of us that judges another part of us and possibly even beats it up, the internal critic. So self-acceptance is the foundation for higher consciousness. It's also foundation for self-love. Self-love occurs as a result of openness. The less defenses you have, the more open you are, the more love you'll perceive. So the way of the heart, which is the beauty way, is achieved by dropping defenses and walking through the world open and vulnerable. Now that's an achievement in itself. The beauty way is the only way that I see that's worth living here. Every other way is kind of scrambling for survival. But it's up to you. You're going to create your reality by the way you think and by the way you act.
Is being in service a requirement if I want to wake up?
No. If you can surrender unconditionally, you have the potential for awakening. When I say awakening, I'm talking enlightenment, which is continuous awakening. Unconditional surrender is the only thing the mind needs to learn. It doesn't need to learn anything else. If your mind can surrender unconditionally, the mind has been prepared for support of enlightenment. You don't have to be in service. You don't have to be anything. Ramana Maharshi went into a cave and woke up. He wasn't in service at that time. He just woke up. He gave his life to truth. He surrendered unconditionally. That's the only deal. Someone who's awake has given their life to truth, or God, or beingness, or pure consciousness, whatever you want to call it. They've given their life. They haven't got any conditions on that gift. It's over. So you don't have to be in service to wake up. No.
A viewer has asked, unconditional surrender to what?
Aha, that's a good question. To what? What are you? Who are you? That's the question the seeker asks. Who am I really? If I'm not this mind, if I'm not this thing that thinks, who am I? What am I? And if you're a meditator, you will have discovered that you can be there without the mind thinking. And so if you're there without the mind thinking, who are you? What are you? This is the big question. And then you begin the search for who are you? I can't tell you who you are because that would be a waste of time. It just wouldn't work. You have to discover that for yourself. And there are a myriad of methodologies to do that with. And they're all hard. It's up to you. But that's the big question. Who am I really?
If I was to start changing my lifestyle in order to obtain enlightenment, from your experience, what are the most important things I would need to do?
Practice openness. Practice openness, practice openness, practice openness. Because if you practice openness, you'll remove all the obstacles that are in the way of openness, and you will develop an equanimous mind. An equanimous mind is a mind that doesn't move when attacked, and it will support enlightenment. Openness counts for everything. That's where I'd begin if I was you, and you will find it quite difficult because you are not programmed for openness. You are programmed for survival, which quite often involves resistance and contraction to life. In the practice of openness, we are practicing acceptance of what is. And it's brilliant. It's difficult though, but the practice of openness has the potential to bring you home to your true nature. Now, combined with the practice of openness, meditation and self-inquiry are wonderful aids to that. Of course, if you really want to find a fast way to wake up, go and hang out with someone who's awake. They'll help take you apart. They'll show you the truth. Hanging out with people who aren't awake, well, they're just as lost as you. They're not going to be able to show you anything. Find someone who's awake, who's found themselves as truth. They know the way. They're not lost. That's the fastest way. But really, the best practice is openness. To walk through the world undefended. Even Jesus said, you cannot enter my kingdom of heaven unless you become like a little child. There's truth in that. You have to become that open, that vulnerable. And in that, you've undone all of this. So, it's a good question. I love openness. It facilitates everything, but it's difficult. You'll have to try to see. See how open you can be with everybody you meet, the people who aren't happy with you, the people who are happy with you, the people who want to hurt you, the people who want to love you. How open can you be all the time? That's the quest. That's the challenge. And the task is yours. Thank you for Satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.